Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 31st Fireside Great Minds, Great Lives talk, and a particular warm welcome to everybody who is new. And thank you for joining us, and hope you're going to enjoy the next hour, which is going to be incredibly special, with an extraordinary person talking to us. Kim Leadbeater is going to be talking to us about her sister, Jo Cox. Kim is ambassador of the Jo Cox Foundation, and here she is now. And tell us, Kim, about where you are. Where are we speaking to you?
Good evening, Sir Anthony. I am in lovely West Yorkshire. I actually live in a village which is in what was Jo's constituency. So I'm up in the north of England, which, having zoomed with lots of people down south all day, I think is greyer than it is down south. But I'm not complaining, because it always pretty much is like that up here.
And those familiar with the series know that we have various quirks on these talks. Always begin by asking the person talking to us to describe the room that they're in, because if it's somebody talking about somebody else or a writer, it's always interesting. So this is where are we?
So I am in my sort of extension to my house, which is a fairly small room, which has become my working from home office in lockdown. So normally we have an office in one of the local towns in Batley, where I have a fantastic team who work with me for the Jo Cox Foundation. I can often be found on trains up and down to London, because we have an office in London as well. But like many people, I have had to succumb to pretty much four walls for the last few months. So I found that really difficult, because everything I do, my energy comes from people. And whilst I have, as many of us have got used to Zooming, it's no substitute for being in the same room as people, is it?
It's not. It's really tough, isn't it? And just tell us how many people work for the foundation and how many volunteers, roughly?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think in terms of staff, we're up to about 14. Some full-time, some part-time, and then volunteers, literally hundreds, Anthony. I mean, locally, we've got an amazing network of volunteers, but we've also got groups up and down the country called More in Common groups, where we've got, like I say, hundreds of people who do stuff all in their free time for nothing, but they are a hugely important part of Jo's legacy.
And for listeners here who are not already volunteers, you'll tell us, Kim, during the talk about how people can join in volunteers. And fantastic. Can I just say the last thing before Kim talks to us is, do have questions. I mean, this is very much a informal hour together, and we love to have questions. So type them in. If they can be brief, that really is a help, because otherwise I spend all the time reading them out. And do put your name on. I mean, anonymous if you like, but it's fine to put your first name, I mean, or surname, and if you want to put an affiliation, do. So we are going to have some wonderful illustrations grouped in 5 collages. I think it's probably the right word. Over to you, Kim, and thank you for very, very much.
No, brilliant. Well, I'm going to start by a big thank you to you, actually, for inviting me to be part of this a hugely impressive series of events that you've put on. I don't know how you've done it. You've had some amazing people that you've spoken to, and I feel very much out of my depth, but I'm also extremely proud to be a part of what you've done. It's wonderful. So thank you to that, and thank you to everybody who is tuning in out there, wherever you are. I hope you're doing okay as these months continue. It is tough, isn't it? And we've all got our own corona coaster that we've been on, but I hope you're doing all right tonight, and thank you for coming and spending an hour with me and with Anthony. So yeah, when we talked about doing this fireside chat, my initial thought was, I don't have a fireside, but I am very good at chatting. So I thought this is all going to be okay. And then I thought about what to talk about, and I thought, actually, let me do this in 3 things. One is I'm going to talk about, obviously, Jo. I'm going to talk about a little bit about our childhood, and then I'm going to go on to talk about Jo in terms of her career, and then I'm going to talk about her legacy and all the amazing work that is being done in her name. So the first little collage of pictures that we've got on there, I've tried to pick some that are not too embarrassing. I've probably failed quite miserably, but really people often ask me about, you know, our childhood and what Jo was like as a kid, and we had a wonderful childhood. We were blessed with two loving, caring parents who couldn't have done any more for us, basically, and they instilled in us this core set of values and beliefs. You know, and I always say these are not rocket science type things. These are things about just treating other people how you would wish to be treated, respecting and, you know, listening to people and trying to empathise with people, those sorts of things. And I'm so grateful that that we were blessed with Jean and Gordon as our wonderful parents. So you've got me and Jo there on one side in our little loving the dungarees. And Jo with her little beautiful little dress on there, and then the other picture in the middle is I think that was a family visit to London, and we like this one because this shows Jo in front of Big Ben with her early aspirations for that forthcoming career. Me, as usual, just carry on alarmingly, which is what I normally did. And what a lot of people don't know is that Jo was actually pretty shy when we were kids, and what a lot of people don't struggle to understand is that I was the gobby one and the bossy one. So I was the one who tended to sort of take centre stage, and Jo was actually really shy. But for me, that makes what she went on to achieve even more impressive, because she had to work really hard to build her confidence. She was always very determined, but she wouldn't necessarily have been the person at the front of the room, you know, when we were kids and stuff. So that's that. And then a couple of the little pictures on there. We've got Jo and I having a little hug. That is in Haworth, which is a beautiful part of Yorkshire.
That's the top one, is it, Kim?
It is indeed, yeah.
On left, yeah.
Having a little cuddle with my nice yellow coat on, and that was part of Jo's hen weekend that we went on. So Jo was very greedy. She had 14 best women when she got married, and I'm delighted that many of those best women have become very close friends to me in the past few years. And we all went up to Haworth, where Wuthering Heights was written. I believe it's Bronte country. So we had a lovely bracing walk, and then by pure contrast we went into Leeds and did really cheesy karaoke. So it was an interesting hen weekend, and it summed up Jo's very different things that she loved in life. We also did a run on the Sunday morning. We did the Race for Life in aid of cancer research on the Sunday morning. So that's there. And then the last one is a picture of Jo and I wet through on the Queen's Jubilee weekend. And this is filmed, is taken on her houseboat. She lived on a houseboat on the River Thames in London. And we went down for a Jubilee party, and as you can see, it rained all day long, but that didn't deter us. And you know, Jo was always very keen that the show must go on, so we were stood on top of the boat with a barbecue in the pouring down rain with our Union Jack flags, and we had a really, really special time. And I think, in summary, I feel so blessed with so many happy memories of a really special childhood and a really special friendship, which I know not all siblings are fortunate enough to have, but I've got nothing but happy memories from that time.
So just before you move on, you're going to cover school days, what Jo's academic interests were, other interests.
Yeah, school days. I mean, we both went to the local primary school. And then we went on to Heckman Dwight Grammar School, which was the local secondary school, and it wasn't a private school, but it was a grammar school. And we were blessed with a really good experience in terms of our education. Jo was head girl. We were both very sporty. We both did very well academically. Jo's behaviour was definitely better than mine. I was like the sister coming through, and you know, and it was hard following Jo through school and indeed through life, because she was pretty good at everything she did, you know, and she was very popular, and so it was tough. So I suppose what I did, I tried to carve out my own personality, my own identity in my own way. But what was really good, and this is one of the amazing things about Jo, we were incredibly close because she was so humble and she never had any sort of ego. So there was never a competition between us. Even though I sometimes might have felt, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not as good as Jo at stuff, but actually she never ever made me feel like that. So yeah, we had a really good education, and what's wonderful now is the schools that we went to locally, we've got a very good relationship with them through the foundation, and they support a lot of the work we do, and some of the teachers who taught myself and Jo are actually still there.
And Kim, how did the shy Jo go on to become head girl?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there was a real sort of ongoing change that she sort of embarked on probably in the sixth form at school, and really pushed herself. Again, this is what was so good about Jo. She really pushed herself to come outside of her comfort zone. And even though she was sort of aware that she was shy, but she knew she wanted to change it. So in the sixth form, she would push herself to do things like we were both in the debating society and things like that. And then I think the big change was going away to university, which I guess a lot of your students and people who are watching tonight may relate to. So Jo got accepted at Cambridge University, and she then had this huge culture shock coming from a very normal northern working class background, landing at Cambridge University, totally out of her comfort zone, feeling like she didn't fit in. And we had a really tough time then, the two of us. And I always talk about this in terms of the work that we've done on loneliness through Jo's foundation. This was a period of really sort of acute and chronic loneliness for both of us. We were so close growing up that then when we were separated, it was like our world sort of fell apart. And I remember this is days before there was sort of any emails, before there was mobile phones. So it literally would be the odd phone call late at night, and we'd both end up crying, saying how much we were missing each other. But again, what I love about Jo is she didn't give up. She didn't give in. And she actually found some like-minded people and made some lifelong friends. Her best friend Sarah and other friends Liz and Steve and Josh and Jane and various other people who several of whom I'm very close to now. And she persevered and she did extremely well and she graduated. So that was a big part of her building her confidence, I think. And then even throughout her career, you know, there were occasions she would ring me and say, I can't do it. And she'd be going to speak somewhere. And she'd, I can't do it. I'm like, you can do it. Of course you can do it. And I think what's really important for young people especially is we all have those voices. We all have those voices saying, you're not good enough, you can't do it. And actually, we need to really work hard to ensure that we know that we are good enough and we deserve to be there.
And how did Pembroke change her? She did social and political science, I think, and at Pembroke College. How political was she before? What was happening inside her?
And that's a really good question. I would say she wasn't particularly political before, but the big thing, and whenever I talk about Jo, is she was a humanitarian. So first and foremost, she was a humanitarian. So even all through our childhood, whilst we weren't a political family, we weren't a politically active family, we were very much taught the principles of caring and looking out for other human beings. So Jo was first and foremost a humanitarian, and that's why when she went into her work with Oxfam and other charities, that was at the forefront of what she did. And then I think when she saw that one of the ways to make real change was to go into politics, that's kind of how she ended up doing that. So she definitely had her political awakening at university, I would say, but she didn't go into politics straight away.
Okay, on to the next pictures.
Yeah, so what have we got coming up next? There's probably quite a few on here. The most important people on these events are always the technical people. There we go. Gosh, there's lots going on there, isn't there? So in terms of what we've got on there, this really is a little bit of photographic evidence of Jo's campaigning and Jo's work as an MP. So the top right there, we've got Jo with mum and dad on the campaign trail. And again, we were very, very clear with Jo when she was campaigning that we didn't want anyone to know who we were, and we would stay in the background and we'd support her, we'd pick the children up, we'd, feed her and clothe her because she was never had any clothes or had forgotten to eat because she was a bit ditzy. And obviously very quickly it's like, actually, this is going to, and that's it. She said to us, oh, it's okay, it won't change your lives at all. And then mum and dad and I, as the months went on, were thinking, that's not strictly true, Jo, is it? And then obviously now, sadly for all the wrong reasons, it's changed our lives forever. But we were so very proud of her when she was campaigning. And I remember when she had the hustings and she got voted in to be the candidate for the job. We had the children, and it was a very rainy day in Yorkshire, another rainy day in Yorkshire, and we'd taken the children to buy a goldfish because we didn't know what else to do. And we came back with Bobby the goldfish, who is actually behind me in the goldfish tank, unbelievably still alive after all these years. And when we got back, Jo had got the the job, well, the candidacy to go to be our MP. So there was huge celebrations. So the campaigning was intense, and much to my dismay, I ended up knocking on doors and telling everyone how wonderful my sister was. And I'm in touch with quite a lot of those people now, which is lovely. And then the other pictures on there really are Jo doing her job, and she was a wonderful constituency MP, and she was always very clear that she did not want to be an MP for anywhere. She wanted to be the MP where we grew up. And where we were born and raised, and indeed where I still live, where my parents still live, where all our family pretty much still live, and lots of our friends. So Batley and Spen was the only place she wanted to stand, and she had been approached about other seats, and she'd said, no, I don't want to do that. The timing was dreadful in that she'd got a young family, and we had lots of conversations around, can I do it? Can I want to be an amazing mum, but I want to be amazing MP as well. But equally, if she hadn't have gone for it then, because the gentleman was retiring who was in the job, then she may never have got another opportunity. So she took it on, and in the short space of time that she did it, she was both indeed an amazing MP and an equally, if not more, amazing mum.
And just, Kim, there, just to get a bit of the pre-chronology, she went into Oxfam in 2001 when she would have been about 26, 27, and promoted incredibly quickly to head of policy and advocacy in Oxfam UK in 2005, and then she won the election in 2015. So Oxfam, the interest in Syria, the interest in public campaigns, that was all growing and building all the time, was it?
Yeah, very much, very much. And to be honest, Anthony, I don't know a huge amount about that time, because she often wouldn't tell us what she was doing, because she was in some quite dangerous situations. And I would say to people locally, they say, what's Jo doing? I'd like, oh, she's off saving the world. And actually, that was probably fairly close to the truth, or certainly she was trying to do her bit to do so. So, yeah, I think she really had lots of experiences in really tough places, war zones, where people often had little food, little water, and sadly very little hope. And I think that really, again, just, kept that humanitarianism really, really alive, and gave her some really powerful experiences.
And did you and your parents worry about her safety at that time?
I think we did, but again, because we didn't always know the detail, we didn't worry probably as much as we should have done. I mean, since then, we've had stories about Jo being chased by pirates and ending up in all sorts of challenging situations. But actually, I think certainly for Mum and Dad, it was probably better not to know.
Very good. So the third collage.
Yeah, sorry, just going back to one point on that last slide, that there is a picture there which I think is quite important just to reference. The thing that I think has come to resonate a lot with people is the expression that was taken from Jo's maiden speech in Parliament. So in the bottom corner there, we've got this expression where Jo said, that she went round the constituency, and we live in a very diverse area here in Batley and Spen, as there are many such areas across the whole country. And Jo said, I go around this constituency, there's lots of differences, lots of diversity, but we are still far more united and have far more in common than that which divides us. And that expression of more in common, I think, has come to resonate as a beacon of hope in difficult times in the last few years. And I think that is one of the really guiding principles of the Jo Cox Foundation and of all the work that we do. So that's Jo's maiden speech in Parliament.
Very good. So the next collage.
So again, I mean, it's hard for me because I obviously don't want to gloss over Jo's murder, but I also think it's really important for me to be honest about the fact that I still haven't dealt with it, and I still have got so much to process about how and why and what happened on that day, and I don't tend to talk about it publicly very often because I haven't gone through that process yet. But what I don't want to do is jump from Jo's fantastic career straight onto her legacy without acknowledging obviously what happened. And I think for me, my life will obviously never be the same again, nor will that of our family and so many of Jo's friends and so many local people in this area. And I've got a lot of work to do in that area. And what I'm very aware of is, since that day, I have thrown myself 100% into the work of the foundation, the local work that we do through the More in Common group, and I haven't paused to think about what happened. So if you've got any psychology students viewing tonight, they possibly could give me some advice as to what I need to do. But I think grief is a very strange thing, and I think death, we know, is part of life. And I think for me, every death is like the centre of an onion, and the circumstances around that death are what define it. And I think sadly for us, there were so many layers to that onion in terms of, you know, murder. I mean, how do you even start to think about the concept of someone you love being murdered? You know, then we had the public side of what happened. Then we were thrown into the media spotlight. I had no desire to ever go on telly, you know, all those things. And then we were thrown into the criminal justice system, and then, you know, suddenly people know who you are. So that period was extremely difficult. But I think what I would say is what got us through as a family is the support that we received from so many people, locally, nationally, internationally. I mean, the things that we were sent and the tributes that were made to Jo, including from yourself, Sir Anthony, were just propping us up in those early days and weeks and months, and now, I would say as well. So I guess it's really important to acknowledge that, but I don't want to get upset. So let's sort of move on to the amazing things that have been done in Jo's name since that day. I've put together a bit of a montage there. I mean, we have the foundation, the Jo Cox Foundation, which was set up initially as a fund, because in those early days there was nothing anybody could do to make it any better. And we've probably all been there in similar situations, or you know, what can we do in the sight of such, in the wake of such a tragedy? Well, we can donate money, and people did donate money. Now at that time we had no plan for the foundation, so we gave that money away to charities that we knew Jo would have supported. So there's amazing work being done by those 3 charities in Jo's name, which is wonderful. And then we said, well, with the money that was remaining, let's set up some sort of foundation, let's set up some sort of organisation. And really the initial plan, I guess, was to finish some of the work that Jo had started. And then that has grown in the last 4 years into what it is today, which I can talk about a little bit more. Pictures on there that we've got at the heart of a lot of our work is the power of community. It's the ability of communities to come together and to people to support each other. And the Great Get Together was very much at the heart of that work. So the Great Get Together, for anybody that doesn't know, we did this on the anniversary of Jo's murder. And again, this was really illustrative of our desire to remember how Jo lived and not how she died. And, you know, I always say I wouldn't blame anybody for shutting up shop, closing the curtains, locking the doors and not doing anything on a day like that. But we wanted to do something meaningful to the country. We wanted to do something that was very powerful and wanted to do something that was very Jo. So basically events took place up and down the country, large and small, of people just coming together and showing what this country is really about. And we've done it every year since. So there's a few pictures on there. One is me up in Scotland doing a launch at the Scottish Parliament with Nicola Sturgeon and all the other leaders of the political parties up there. And I'm really conscious that as a foundation and as an individual, everything we try and do is on a cross-party basis where possible, because that's one of the things that Jo really believed in, was getting work done on the issues that mattered and working with whoever shared your vision. And I think we're very keen to do that through the foundation. Couple of other things on there. We've got the Run for Jo. This is a local event. I am blessed, like I say, with an amazing bunch of volunteers locally who stepped up, you know, in those early months, and I've continued to step up time and time again. And a group of people, Jules and Dave and several other people, organised the Run for Jo. And it's brilliant. We do it at the local country park and we get 1,000 people running through the woods. The first year we did it, Eddie Izzard graced us with his presence, so that was all a bit bonkers. That's the other thing that's happened to me. I've met quite a few famous people, and that's all very strange and weird, but it's amazing as well because they're just people like the rest of us. So that's a little bit about the Run for Jo. And what was so lovely this year, because we couldn't do obviously the events in person, we, instead of cancelling or postponing the Great Get Together, we flipped it and said, right, let's just reinvent the wheel here and do something different. So we did the run online as a virtual event, and we had thousands of people across the world taking part in the Run for Jo across 35 different countries. It was absolutely wonderful. So that's that. Should we go on to the next one, because I'm talking way too much?
You're not. at all?
Yeah, so again, a bit of an array there, a bit of a montage of photos of the stuff. The bottom corner there is me doing the warm-up at the Run for Jo, because my previous life was very much around education. So I was a lecturer, but also around physical activity and health and well-being. So that was my sort of former life. So I used to teach, as part of that, teach very cheesy aerobics classes and exercise classes. So when we came up with the Run for Jo, it was an opportunity for me to revisit those skills and get up on stage and do the warm up for all the people who are going to do the run. So that's what that is. We've got various other events in there. We do a big schools event locally where we get 1,000 children from 23 different local schools coming together and doing a walk through the town centre in Batley. And these are kids who might not necessarily come across each other. And that's really an important part of our work, is bringing people from different backgrounds together, but in a really positive way. So it's not forced, but it's just naturally meeting people who you wouldn't normally meet. We do an iftar, and I was, 3 years ago, I didn't know what an iftar was, but we have quite a big Muslim community in Batley. So we sit down, we say, well, how are we going to engage some parts of the community who might not come to the other stuff that we're doing? Well, let's do an iftar. So I eventually found out that an iftar is the meal that is eaten as the sun goes down during Ramadan. So we set about, and this is one of the most challenging meetings that I think I've ever chaired. There was a lot of negativity in the room. There was a lot of, oh, people aren't going to come, the Muslim community won't come, the non-Muslim community won't come, the women won't come, the kids won't come. And I said, right, hang on a minute, we're doing this, so let's crack on, let's try and make it work. And then several months later, we ended up with people from across the area coming together. We optimistically catered for 250 people, and we got 1,000 people lining the streets and coming to this hugely spiritual and moving event. Various other things that we do cakes on the cobbles, we do a memorial rugby game, again, because my background is in physical activity and sport. I feel hugely passionate about the power of sport to bring people together. So we work very closely with the local rugby club, the Batley Bulldogs, and we put on this free game where everyone can come and be part of something really special. We do a community service, which is interfaith based, but also people from all different faiths and non coming together in the open air in Batley. And again, this year we put that online, and I think we've had over 10,000 people watch it. It's a very, very beautiful piece of work. Reverend Mark Umpleby, who we work with locally, and Hafiza Soni, who is one of my amazing staff team up here, put that together. So there's lots of different examples there of the community work that we do. That's the very localised work of the foundation. But what's also wonderful is that there are lots of other more in common groups across the country who also do similar things. And that's really heartwarming to feel that you're part of a really powerful network of people who are doing stuff. Shall we move on to the next one? Yeah, and I suppose this is just a little bit about the broader work of the foundation and the broader legacy work. One of the things that I'm very proud of is the work that we've done on loneliness. And Jo had started this piece of work on a cross-party basis with Seema Kennedy, who was a Conservative MP, and she'd identified loneliness as an issue, partly based on her own personal experience, as I've already discussed, but partly from the door knocking around the constituency and meeting lots of people who really just wanted to chat and wanted some company and were socially isolated or struggling, feeling lonely. So after Jo was killed, Rachel Reeves, who's there in the top corner, who is a Leeds MP, took up the challenge that Seema laid down to continue the work that Jo had started. And Seema, Rachel, and then our CEO at the time, Iona Lawrence, pulled together this amazing coalition of people working on loneliness and organisations. And a lot of this, and this is again what I love about the foundation, a lot of this was work that was already being done, but just needed pulling together. And the foundation is really powerful at doing that, because that's one of the key strengths and skills that Jo had. Anyway, long story short, lots and lots of hard work behind the scenes. We ended up with the world's first ever Minister for Loneliness, Tracy Crouch, and the world's first ever government strategy to tackle loneliness. And that is work that we have continued in the following years. Not more so than recently, actually, because as a result of lockdown and COVID-19, we were very worried that in those early weeks there was an awful lot of focus on what people couldn't do, and there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of worry, obviously, for so many people, but there wasn't a huge amount of focus on the lack of human connection that people were going to inevitably experience. And I think we felt that as a foundation, and as a result of that, Iona, our ex-CEO, who does a huge amount of really important work on human connection, said, look, we need to do something. So we launched a new initiative called the Connection Coalition, and we've basically pulled together nearly 500 different organisations now. We've got the Red Cross, we've got Mind, we've got big organisations, but we've also got small community organisations as well, who are a really important part of it. And that piece of work so far has been how we can focus on the human connection that we have lost through lockdown and through COVID, because I think, you know, that sense that I think we all have of loss. Sadly, for some people, that is real tragic loss of loved ones. But for many of us, it is the loss of our freedoms, and it's the loss, as I say, of that connection. So the Connection Coalition has been a really important piece of work. Another couple of pictures that are on there, we've got the Jo Cox Community Wood. This is an amazing project of the Spen Valley Civic Society, which is done locally. They took over this piece of wasteland, and I am always an optimist, and I am always like, can do. But when they showed me this piece of land, I thought, this is not going to happen. But actually, these amazing people, most of whom were in their 60s and 70s, took over this piece of land, and they have made the most beautiful community wood in Jo's name. So that's a fantastic piece of work. We've got Mum and Dad there outside the Jo Cox Conference Centre at Upper Batley High School. Upper Batley High School are a really, really important partner for us. The head teacher up there, Sam Vickers, knew Jo, met Jo, and they'd really bonded because they both started their job at a similar time. So we do a huge amount of work with Upper Batley High School. And indeed, you know, education for me is a really important piece of what we do. We have to be working with young people. They are the future, and we have to be working with them all the time. And the final picture, and then I'm going to shut up, is the bottom one there, where we have got the wonderful Jo Cox Way bike ride. Now, this is a slightly different initiative in that this was set up by a gentleman who had never met Jo, a lovely man from North Yorkshire called Safraz Mayan, and he was so devastated by her murder that he just had to do something. And there's lots of people who have got similar stories to this. So he's a cyclist, and he thought, right, I'm going to cycle from Yorkshire to London, and I'm going to reenact Jo's political journey. So him and some friends got together, and that was actually in the August of 2016, and they did this bike ride. And then over the next couple of years, I found out about it, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. We need to support this through the foundation. Clearly, one way of supporting it was to do it. So I was dragged in 2018 to do the 5-day bike ride to London, and I am not a cyclist, so it was very tough, but I did it. And again, just to finish, it would be the bike ride starting tomorrow, but obviously we can't do it. So what we've done, in true Jo Cox Foundation fashion, we are focused on what we can do rather than what we can't do, and we are asking people to pledge miles to try and help us to cycle the circumference of the globe. So by Sunday, we need people to have cycled 25,000 miles. And I would love anybody who's listening tonight who is anywhere near a bicycle over the next few days, go on the Jo Cox Way Bike Ride website or go on the Strava group that we've set up, pledge some miles and get involved in the Jo Cox Way Bike Ride. I always say, you know, Jo was a woman of action, as am I. So whenever I speak to anybody publicly, I always like to have a few calls to action, and that is my first one this evening.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Kim. That was absolutely wonderful. And we have 1,250 different sets watching it. So I think we would say we'd had upward of 2,000 people watching. That's the outset. That number, I'm sure, has increased, Kim. And just give again the details for those who might want to be involved. How can people?
Yeah, so the bike ride specifically, we have a website, www.thejocoxway.org.uk. For those that are more serious cyclists, there is a Strava group, so you can go on Strava and you can join the Jo Cox Way event. People who know Strava will understand how that works. And yeah, and then you pledge your miles. So basically, you might pledge like me, not very many miles, but they all count and they will all add up. Or you might be like some of the other amazing, you know, hardcore cyclists who were going to do the whole ride, which is actually 280 odd miles, and they've pledged to try and do a similar amount across the weekend. Obviously they'll do it wherever they are in the country. We've got one chap, a lovely guy, who has done it for the past couple of years and supported me, Steve Brighton. He's going to do the first day of the actual bike ride starting tomorrow, so he's going to cover, there's a very hilly area coming out of Yorkshire called the Strines, and it literally goes up and down like that, and he's going to be tackling that this week. So, but again, for me, it will be a few miles on the local greenway, which is nice and flat. I'll probably stop for a sandwich and a cuppa at some point, and it'll be nice and relaxed, but they all count.
And question, how are mum and dad doing? How are they coping?
Oh, do you know what? Mum and dad are doing really well, Anthony. I rung them just before we started, because like lots of people of an age, they have had to embrace technology in ways that they never anticipated they would have to. So we've had them Zooming with Jo's kids. We've had them doing all family Zoom calls and stuff. And so I said, right, this is a new one tonight. This is a webinar. So I still don't think they quite understand what a webinar is, but I'm hoping they have managed to get on and use the link. But they're doing really well. I mean, they've been really, really good through lockdown. And I think, again, this goes back to what I said earlier about the approach to life that I think Jo and I were taught. There is always a glass half full approach. And, you know, mum and dad were like, look, we're really lucky. We've got each other. We've got a nice house. We've got a garden. We've got nothing to moan about. And we need to just, you know, try and get on with this. And that's what they've done. And we've had a few socially distanced visits. I mean, June was hard. I have to be honest. June this year was very hard. And I think they found it particularly hard, the anniversary of Jo's murder, because what we'd normally be doing would be out in the community with all these amazing people that you've seen on some of the pictures, and obviously we couldn't do a lot of that. So I think we found that really tough, and I've spent a lot of my time on the computer and, you know, doing things virtually, which I think has kept me going, but they didn't have that. So I think we'll be reconnecting with lots of people when it's safe and we're able to do so. But mum and dad, send their love.
If they're watching, then love from everybody. Watching to them, two remarkable people. If they're not watching now, I hope they can watch on catch up. And I know you don't want to talk about the children, but just to mention them in passing, just are they doing okay?
Oh no, I am actually fine talking about the children. They are doing amazingly well. They are just so full of energy and excitement, and they're so positive. I mean, Jo's little girl Layla looks exactly like Jo, to the extent where when you show her a picture of mummy, we'll say, who's this Layla? And Layla will go, no, it's me. You know, and they literally, which is, you know, as many things are, heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. And Jo's little boy Coolin, he's just a proper adventurer. You know, they know no fear. They do mountain climbing. They've been up in Scotland climbing Munros. They've been kayaking. That, you know, they're doing all sorts of amazing things. And their dad is the best dad that they could hope for. So, like I say, that is always heartwarming and heartbreaking in equal measure. It's the thing I find hardest, because, you know, all those memories that we're creating, you know, they should be Jo's memories.
And Culin named after the mountains in Skye.
Yeah, so Jo found out she was pregnant with Coolin on top of one of the Coolin mountains. So that is how he got his name.
Didn't know that. And tell us about Jo and canal barges. Was it a Dutch barge that was parked up near London, Tower Bridge, wherever it was?
Yeah, so again, you know, bonkers Jo, oh, let's live on a boat. And it was actually her husband who was living on a boat. So they started living on the boat together, and then they bought their own boat, Ada Lazy, beautiful boat. And what's so lovely about it is where it's moored in London, it's very central, but it's a real community. And I think there's about 15, 20 boats there, but it's a bit like, you know, some of the stuff that I've talked about already this evening. It's a bit like community used to be. Everybody knows each other, everybody looks out for each other. So even in the middle of central London, you've got this really powerful community. But it wouldn't do for me, I have to say. It's yeah, it's when the boats go past on the River Thames, the boat is literally rocking from side to side. But the kids have just got used to it, and they're very, very happy there.
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to go for the last part, to the questions. And again, a reminder to everybody out there, I think you can only send questions if you're listening on Teams. I don't know why that is, but if not, do send a message to somebody who you know is watching on Teams and ask them to ask the question for you. First question from Tara. Not certain you'll want to go there on this, but have you been able to forgive?
Oh gosh, Tara, straight in there.
Yeah, straight in there. Right.
Straight in there. I don't even think about it or him, to be honest. So I haven't really started to think in those terms. I think if I had to say yes or no, it would be a definite no.
Anne asks, they go straight in here. These, I don't actually. These could be from anywhere. Anne says, "Do you think if Jo's still alive, she would have gone all the way up as Labour leader? Would that's what? Did she have ambitions? Did she talk to you, Kim, about it?"
Yeah, interesting. We did talk about that a little bit, and I mean, she was definitely very ambitious. Would she have wanted to be leader? I'm not sure about that. I mean, I would see her very much as a foreign secretary or international development, or those sort of areas. But who knows? I mean, she was a brilliant leader, and I think she was a brilliant leader because she took people with her, and I think that's a really powerful skill. So who knows? I think she would certainly be pleased with the sort of changes within the Labour Party in the last few months.
And because didn't Jo nominate? Didn't she nominate Jeremy Corbyn, but then vote for Liz Kendall? I might have got that wrong.
So I think what Jo did, and she spoke openly about this. She did a piece in, I think it was The Guardian, about it. Was she nominated Jeremy Corbyn because she wanted an open field, and she wanted it to be a really sort of fair process. But I think she sadly went on to regret that decision, and I don't think she regretted much in her time as an MP, but she definitely regretted that.
Gail says, you may well have answered this. I want to help get involved with the foundation. How can I?
Gail, yay! Well, there's loads of ways. One thing that we are really driving and developing at the minute is our More in Common network. So I think I sort of alluded to it earlier on, but we've essentially got a bunch of volunteers here in Batley and Spen, and we're called More in Common Batley and Spen, and we're trying to grow those groups across the country. We've got a great group in Darlington, we've got one in Basildon, Birmingham, but we need more. And equally, that could even be within a university setting. So one thing you could do is look to set up a More in Common group, and if you want to get in touch with us via the foundation, that's one way of doing that. Other easy ask, get involved with the Great Get Together. We do the Great Get Together every June, but we also do a winter get together. And I think because of the situation we're in, this is going to be really important this year. The winter get together tends to focus a little bit more on loneliness and social isolation. And I think sadly, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, we are going to have a lot of issues around loneliness and social isolation, and indeed mental health and well-being in the coming months. So we're looking at organising events and activities for the Great Winter Get Together. So you can find out more information about that on the Great Get Together website. And then there's obviously joining in with all our events. The very quick way you can get involved, Gail, is to get on a bike. But yeah, I mean, the ways to look for information is the Jo Cox Foundation website, and then the Great Get Together website. Those are the two main ways, and there'll be email addresses and things on there that you can look at. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
So question here. Can you talk a bit more about a wonderful talk somebody is saying, and thank you, and it is. Can you say anything more, Kim, about loneliness, about whether it's growing, and wouldn't that be odd, and whether loneliness is met through digital, or whether it needs to be the physical hugging and touching, and what are the best cures for loneliness?
Yeah, I mean, I'm extremely proud of the work that we've done on loneliness, but there is more to do, and sadly, as a result of the last few months, I think there's going to be even more to do. I think the first thing with I would say with any problem is to acknowledge it exists, and I think we've seen some really good work taking place on that over the last few years. I think we've tried to reduce the stigma around loneliness, and that means having conversations. It means being honest and not being embarrassed to admit it, because I think the vast majority of us at some point in our lives will feel lonely. And if you look at those circumstances, that's not surprising. So if you are a student who goes away to a new town or city and doesn't know anyone, I think it'd actually be a bit weird if you didn't feel a bit lonely. Equally, if you lose a loved one, I felt really lonely. That doesn't mean I've not got people around me. And this is the other distinction. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. We can have a really good network, but if we're not getting the depth of connection that we need, then that can make us feel really lonely. Or again, for older people who are the natural group that we talk about when we talk about loneliness, if you've been married to someone for 40 years and they pass away, again, I think it would be really strange if you didn't feel lonely, but we have to be able to have those conversations. I think that the other big piece of work that, really struck me through all the research that we did was, this is not an age thing. Clearly, we do need to look at older people as well, but this can affect anybody at any stage during their life. And it might be, like I say, going away to university, it might be divorce, it might be losing your job, so it's men and women, so we need to look very holistically at it as an issue. And I think it's then doing a bit of a check-in for your network. Are you getting what you need from the relationships that you've got in your life? And it might be that, like I say, loads of people, but you're not having depth of connection, and that's really important. So yeah, I think the fact that we're having a conversation about it now is brilliant, and in fact there's lots of those conversations going on, and I think not being afraid to admit it is also really important.
So an anonymous question here. I'm feeling lonely in my life. Is there any particular advice that you have for me on top of what you said already?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, and it does take a bit of courage, is to reach out and to find out what is going on where you live, what is going on in your local area, because I guarantee there'll be other people who feel the same as you do. Again, I always tend to default to sort of sport and physical activity. So is there a walking group that you can join? Something like that. I play hockey, so for me, team sport is really powerful, and I've got some fantastic friends who I've met through team sport, but it might be something else, like it might be the knit and natter group. It might be, the bowls, whatever it is, a writing group, an art group. Is there something like that you can try and get yourself involved with? I think that's really powerful. I think now as well, clearly some of those things cannot happen in real life, but I think there's a lot of stuff online now that you can look at. And again, if you want some ideas specifically on where you are based, if you go on the Connection Coalition website, there are lots of organisations doing lots of amazing things. You've got things like chatty cafes, you've got the Friendly Bench, you've got lots of little organisations who are there to serve this purpose.
How did Jo herself tackle her loneliness at Cambridge? She went 27 years ago. It must have been quite strange then. It was a much less socially diverse institution than it has become.
Yeah, no, very much.
How bad was it for her, particularly in that first year? What did she do?
Oh, it was tough. And like I say, we would have phone calls late at night where we'd both be crying. And I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I was the one saying, come home, just come home. And that was partly selfishly because I wanted to come home, but partly because I didn't want to see her in so much pain and struggling so much. But I think part of it was being patient. You don't turn up anywhere on day one and suddenly you've got a network of people. It doesn't work like that, does it? But so then you need to develop that network. So I guess that goes back to maybe the other question as well, developing a network of people who can support you and you can support them, and those sorts of things. So Jo put herself out there and joined various societies, joined various different organisations, and as a result of that, like I say, she met her best friend Sarah, and then various other people who she had found common ground with. And I think by meeting them, they were then able to broaden their network even further to people who they probably wouldn't have necessarily approached on their own, but as a little group they felt more comfortable approaching. So yeah, I think those opportunities, and also just try, because I think you grow your most when you step outside your comfort zone, don't you? So some of that stuff is really challenging to do, walking into a room where you don't know anybody, or even joining a call where you don't know anybody, can be really challenging, but that's when you grow. And I think, I learned that through the early part of my career. even though it's really hard. If you can give it a go, you'll and don't be afraid to fail. So if it doesn't work the first time, then don't be defeated. And I think also, my other things which I am rubbish at is asking for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I'm just dreadful at it, but I'm working on it.
And we'll take one last question on this. I'm worried about my body shape. I don't think I can do exercise. What advice would you have? I understand that exercise is good. What advice can you give?
Oh, bless you. That's a great question. Well, interestingly, I still do a little bit of personal training, and I work with quite a lot of young women with similar sorts of issues. I think what we need to think about when we come to exercise, and this is kind of going back to my previous career, is about being healthy rather than focusing on what you look like. So for me, exercise is all about being healthy, being strong, and looking after yourself physically and mentally. So I take a very holistic approach to it. You do need, with exercise, you do need to find something you like. So unless you've tried every single thing, I think it's still worth trying to find something you like. Walking is the best option, I would say, if you want to get started. Get out there, the power of the fresh air, get your earphones in, listen to some music or listen to a podcast, whatever it is, and just get out there and do some walking. And again, maybe try and find something that can be a social thing as well. So like when I used to teach exercise classes, I'd get 30 women in a room, and actually it wasn't about the exercise. It was about the chat and the fun and the laughter and the time away from your kids or your husband or whoever else it was. And so I think finding something you enjoy and persevering with that is really important. And also on the body image side of it, learning to love yourself as you are, because none of us are perfect. And I can spend all my days wishing for longer legs or curly hair, but it's not going to happen. I've just got to do the best with what I've got. And I think, for women and men, that's a really important lesson to learn.
Chris, who's a mature student, often a different tack here, is wanting to know about people's motivations for joining charities, and specifically on the Jo Cox Foundation and all the various affiliated bodies. What is it, Kim? Is there a common thing or a whole series of different motivations?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think most of the staff who work for the foundation were, in our instance, very inspired by Jo, very inspired by the values that Jo stood for and wanted to be a part of that, and were probably in equal measure totally devastated by her murder. So I think our starting point is possibly different to some other charities which are based around maybe specific causes. I think there's a genuine human instinct to try and help. I really hope that most people have got that within them, and by being part of a charity or volunteering or something, that's a really good way of doing that. I get my strength when I am helping other people. That is where I get a lot of my energy from. So I think there is something about us as human beings, and I think sadly sometimes people just need to be given that opportunity to do that. And all the people who volunteer with us, and we've got some amazing people, get as much out of it as they give. Do you know what I mean? The way that it makes them feel is really, really important.
And John is saying, thank you, Kim, for your positivity and connections with, and he says your connection with the audience has been amazing. There you are. Thank you, John. Peter is saying, Kim, what advice, based on your own experience, can you give for others dealing with grief? How can you help us, those suffering from grief?
Gosh, that's a really tough one. And as I've sort of said earlier on, my way of dealing with grief has been not to deal with grief, if I'm quite honest, and that's not healthy. I suppose what I've got is the self-awareness to know that. I think the one thing that does get me through is the memories that we've got, and I think that's really, really powerful. So I think it's whoever you've had in your life, you've got to focus on how lucky you were to have them in your life, and what you got from them and what they brought to your life. I think that's a really powerful way of coping. And I think I also, on a daily basis, know that Jo wouldn't want me to spend time you know, being, I don't know, to spend time being distraught with grief, unless I really needed to be. That's the difference. She would want me to spend my time being happy and being positive and, you know, doing all the things that we're doing. So that inspires me. I think, what would that person want you to do? You know, would they want you to shut yourself up in a dark room and give up on the world? You know, and I don't think many people who love you or care about you would want that. But what I'm also clear about is, you know, that Jo would also want me to give into that as and when I need to. So you've also got to be kind to yourself in that regard. And I think, you know, surround yourself with people who make you feel happy, who make you feel good. And that, you know, that's really kept me going. And I think also, you know, talking about that person, like I talk about Jo all the time, and sometimes that's easier, you know, on some occasions than it is on others, but keep that person alive in your world. You know, we do that a lot with the kids. And that, you know, that can also be very painful, but I think it's a really powerful way of coping as well.
2 questions, Kim, in 2 minutes to go. Ben says, building on that, how should we remember Jo? You have done a fantastic job of keeping her memory alive.
Oh, bless you. Well, that is very kind of you to say. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think, you know, remember Jo as someone who wanted to make a difference in the world and did make a difference in the world. And take those values that Jo exhibited and try and use them in your own life. You know, like I said, Jo's humility, Jo's lack of ego. You know, she genuinely wanted what was best for everybody. You know, whether that was friends or constituents or, you know, people in any of the countries that she worked in. A real sense of humility, I would say. I mean, don't get me wrong. The other thing I think we have to be really clear about is she was far from perfect, and she was very dizzy and ditzy.
So what was her worst? What was her worst thing about her?
Oh, Anthony, she was a nightmare. I mean, she'd never remember birthdays. She'd always turn up without any money, without the right clothes to wear. So, like, you know, Fazila and Sandra, who worked for Jo, and me and her friends and stuff, like, oh, can I borrow a dress? Can I borrow some flat shoes? Or, you know, oh, have you got anything to eat? You know, the night before, sadly, she was killed, Dad was summoned to her little cottage up here in Yorkshire because she hadn't got any food. So he did an emergency delivery of bananas and custard because that's what she fancied. You know, so there was always a bit of and the number of times she'd come around here and we'd get a takeaway and she'd get her card out to pay. Well, the guy's on the doorstep, Jo, and in Yorkshire, they don't take cards on the doorstep. So, yeah, so she was far from perfect. So remember those funny stories as well.
Absolutely. And Sarah's saying, not a question at all, Kim, but this has been an amazing talk. The power of physical activity and health for communities is just one part of it that should never be underestimated. And Lou is coming, I don't know where Lou is, says, have you ever considered yourself, Kim, going into politics?
Oh, gosh, tough question to finish on. I haven't in the short term, if I'm honest, partly because I think that would, you know, be a real challenge for mum and dad to deal with. And partly because, if I'm quite honest, and I tend to not get drawn into anything too political, but for the past few years, I wouldn't have felt that I had a home in politics, if I'm honest. So I think in the future, I guess you never say never. But I also gain a lot of my energy and strength from doing the community-based stuff that I do. But I also think, you know, if you are going to get proper change, you do have to have a voice in the political arena as well, which as a foundation, I'm very fortunate that we do have that as well.
Okay, before thanking you, can I just say very quickly that tomorrow you're very welcome, everybody, to stay with the talks. You can look at the list, send them to friends, they're all free. Please join us tomorrow night. We've got the biographer of Michelangelo and Van Gogh and David Hockney talking with illustrations, and then on Friday we've got Rachel Kelly talking about good food, good poetry, and good loving for lockdown. And next week we've got Rory Stewart talking about his time in Afghanistan, etc., etc. Do join all these sorts. Lots more questions are coming in. I daren't go into them. Can I also say that tomorrow we got here speaking at the University of Buckingham, the President of the UN General Assembly, who, by the way, is apparently, I didn't know this, senior to the Secretary General, and they're talking, and we would love you to listen in. And Matt, who is our technical person, will put that up at the end for you to have a look at. We'd love to have you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And just to say thank you, and we're going to ask you before you go, to choose your favourite book.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I wasn't ready for that at all. Oh my gosh, my favourite book. Oh, that is an absolute nightmare. Oh gosh.
You can see this wasn't prepared.
This was not prepared at all. This was not prepared at all. Gosh, I'm going to have to go for the book that Jo's husband wrote, because that essentially tells a lot about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Give the title.
A lot about our story. It's called More in Common.
Yeah. What a great choice, and your favourite piece of music. And you're not allowed to have a sort of keep fit piece of music. Just what do you most love?
Favorite piece of music? Well, sadly there is a link to Keep Fit, but I do love cheesy 80s pop music.
Go for something.
That is my thing. So we go for something probably by maybe Duran Duran.
I knew you were going to go for Duran Duran. Absolutely knew it. Okay, so we're going to finish there. I thought it was an instinct. It's been very moving for me, the whole Jo's story, who she was, what happened, and the great goodness that's come out of it is incredibly moving. I've dedicated a couple of books I've written to her memory. As Kim knows, it's very special for me, as it is for thousands of people listening tonight. Do share this talk with more, so that more people can come into the whole movement and share the values. And thank you very, very much indeed for an amazing talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
And particular hi to your mum and dad if they're listening in.